Alright guys, it's look back time again at one of my older builds that was pre-YouTube. This time we're going to be looking at the brutish dog from the Japanese animated series Votoms. Interesting thing about this build, as you can tell from the box, this thing has been in a closet for almost over 20 years before I got my hands on it again. It was started by my younger brother, and now I'm going to finally finish it after all these decades. I know most of you out there won't be familiar with the Votoms anime series. It's a series of war, political intrigue, and all the machinations that go along with constant battle and warfare between planets. So I'm going to show you a little bit of what it's all about. Check this out. And that's just a taste of what you can expect from Votom's Armored Troopers. You guys should check it out if you get a chance. Now let's take a look at the history of the model itself. Alright, let's take a look at the history of the brutish dog here. As we're going to look it up on ScaleMates and see where this kit began and when it was produced, because I remember it being from the 80s. So let's take a look here. This is the exact version that I have here in this video. As you can see, it's labeled SAK 1/35 scale, which is a Takara. I don't know why it's labeled SAK, but it is Takara when it's initially released. And this is a 1/35 scale. As it is a Takara. ATM Brutish Dog, scale 1/35. Brand new release in 1983. Which basically it is just a retooling of the Scope Dog kit for most of the chassis. And then the parts that make it the Brutish Dog were added, such as the gun arm and a few other small details. As most of the Votoms kits were based off of the same initial chassis. So let's take a look at the timeline here. As you can see, the new tool was for the main mech of the series, which is the Scope Dog, and that served as the basis for all of the other mechs. And that was released in 1983. So if we follow the timeline, there's another version of the Scope Dog. And here is where the brutish dog is released. Let's go back to that timeline there. let's see, we're going the wrong way. Okay, let's go back to Brutish Dog. And that's where Brutish Dog is released. As it is basically a revamping of the Scope Dog model for the other versions of this mech. Now, the interesting part is that while the box is labeled SAK for the 1983 release, if we continue down the timeline, there we go through 1983, it's not released again until 1990 something. At some point in 1990, the kit is released again, but as you can see now, it no longer is labeled as SAK, but as a Takara, utilizing pretty much the same box art, just slightly recolored, with the font being changed a little bit, but the art of the mech is basically still the same. So let's continue to follow the timeline just for curiosity and see how far it goes. So at 1990, whoops, hold on. Here we go. We're in 1990 where it was released, and then it is not released again until 1990 something again, when it is released with, again, a revamped box, only on the font itself, utilizing the same box art. Apparently it's been released again. It's got new parts. 1997 is when this is released. So now let's follow it again from 1997, and let's see, 97, and I guess that is the final release of this kit, unless the timeline only goes that far. Thought there was more to it. Oh wait, here we go. Model set, where you get 3 of the mechs in one kit, combining all of their 1/35th scale kits. And I guess this is the last time that we see the Brutish Dog in production in the 1/35th scale. I know that they did release it in the 1/20th scale, but for 1/35th, this would be the last time that it's released in 2006. So that is a whole timeline from 1983 to 2006 for the 1/35th scale Brutish Dog. If you're a fan of votoms like I am, you'll find it interesting to know exactly when this kit was released and how many different versions there were. Alright, so let's take a look at the build. Now, when I opened the box, this is what I found. This is what's been sitting in there for over 20 years. Found that my brother had painted it completely black. He'd done a bit of battle damage, so I was just going to take it over from there and make some changes. Here you can see one of the major points of damage, where he cut the leg open and inserted some wires to make it look like as if it had taken a hit, and all the internal wiring and circuitry were hanging out of the leg. And here we have the cockpit and the pilot as he had painted it. Not really very accurate to the anime, but then we didn't know much better back then. Another major bit of battle damage where he ripped the gun arm open and just put some tubing and lines to make it look like if it had exploded or been hit by shrapnel. Now, this is where I come into the picture over 20 years later. I decided I'm just going to repaint the entire thing and bring the colors a little closer to what was in the initial anime. I started by stripping and repriming all the parts of the kit, and then I went back and painted them with olive drab from Tamiya on most of the armor and smaller components, and then I used some Tester's olive drab for the larger parts. After all the paint work was done, time for custom work. This is my favorite part of the build. I designed control panels and interior components that the kit never came with, because I wasn't really happy with how the cockpit looked on the on the model itself. One of the things that really bothered me about this kit was that the lower torso of the pilot was molded into the floor of the cockpit itself. So that basically he had knees, but nothing more. So I decided I was gonna hide the flooring where his legs meld into the floor with all sort of components that would probably be in there if you were really piloting a mech suit. I designed the base of the control panels out of styrene, and then I added all sorts of greebles from photo etch material that I had left over. And that really helped to fill in the cockpit. Then with a little bit of detailed paint work and some background paneling, we had an entirely detailed cockpit that surrounded the pilot so that you couldn't see his lower legs being molded as part of the floor, which really comes off well when it's inside the model. I also proceeded to dress up the rear walls and the sides of the cockpit to really add more detail and more depth to it. And then I just went over everything with some panel line wash to dirty it up a little bit, and it really gives a convincing look to the interior of the armored suit. Once all of that was done, it was time for some pre-assembly. I got the paint work done, a little bit of battle damage, and then I put it all together just to see what it would look like. It's still not completely done as the visor is not painted yet, but you can see what the final thing is starting to come together and look like. Here you can see the pilot's position inside the armored suit, and you can also see where the metal is bent up on the corner there just to show a little bit more damage. One of the features of this kit was a hinged helmet assembly on the mech suit, which you could open up to reveal the inside and show the pilot, which works really well with all the detailing that I added to be able to show it all off. Now came time to pay attention to some of the other portions of the kit, such as the sides and the rear of the model. Had to do all sorts of battle damage, wear and tear on the model on all different sides, because the story of this is he went through a fight that he just barely escaped from by the slimmest of margins and is now limping his mech suit back home. Now this kit, for as small as it is, came with an amazing number of decals. Now I had to scan them and make my own, as 30-year-old decals are really not going to work very well. Now we're getting close to being completely done. You can see everything is painted now. He's got his trinocular lenses on his visor, and you can see how much dirt, scorch marks, and battle damage and chipping I added to this kit. I really wanted to make it look like he was in the battle of his life, and he just barely won it. Here we have claw marks from some of the other bots that he fought, more pieces of the armor which is broken off and bent out, bullet holes in the arms from the shots he took, the gun arm which is blown up, missing a finger on one hand, and the antenna that was broken right off of his visor. This guy just barely made it home, and I wanted you to see that from all the damage on the suit itself. One other part of the kit that kind of bothered me was inside the helmet. It was just plain and empty. So I took a bunch of the photo etch greebles I had and just glued them to the interior just to give it some sort of a high-tech look on the inside of the helmet itself. Now we have the completely finished product, a completely battered and beaten mech suit with the pilot, and you can see just how small this thing was. For me to add all of these details wasn't really easy, as tiny as this thing is, but I think it comes off convincingly as a battered and beaten mech suit that's making his way home.
ずっと後で知ったことだ。